Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2. We are going to let everyone get in, get settled, and we'll start in about a minute or so. Thank you for being here, and we'll kick off shortly. Okay, everyone, we are going to start. Welcome again to episode 2 of Shark Tank. We're back from a holiday weekend, so no doubt this will energize you and get you motivated and fired up for this week. And you're in for a very fascinating experience today. We're joined by CEO Dan Simmons. I like to think of him as a maverick CEO. When you meet him, you will know why. I will let Keith introduce him shortly. Just some housekeeping notes. The session is very straightforward. It's a true first meeting simulation. So you will get to listen to the pitch for about 30 minutes. And then afterward, we'll debrief and Dan will share what he thought, what he liked, what he thought he would have liked to have seen, and that type of insight and collaboration. At the end, we will have time for a Q&A where your questions will be able to be addressed and Dan will give you feedback. So during the session, please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A box and we will get to as many as we can during that dedicated time. And with that, I'm gonna let Keith Lemmer take it away. Keith.
Terrific. Thank you, Megan, and welcome everybody. And Dan Simons, I'm glad you joined us today. We are here for our second episode of the second season of Shark Tank, as Megan relayed. We're joined by our faux advisor, Dave Earle, Chief Revenue Officer from WellNet Healthcare. And let me take a moment to introduce Dan today. So Dan is the CEO of Farmers Restaurant Group. They have a host of restaurants in the Mid-Atlantic region. I believe it's about 7 now, and they feed about 60,000 diners on a weekly basis. Dan and his team are really known for farm to table, sustainable food, and really their passion for hospitality. Dan's a leader in the space and really trying to move the entire industry forward. And so not only does Dan spend his days running his restaurant, he also blogs from time to time about restaurants, hospitality, leadership, and even fatherhood. Dan's also 2018 Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year winner in the Mid-Atlantic region, and is also founder of what's called Last Straw. So really working to eliminate the use of plastic straws and environmental hazards. The best part about Dan is that he is on a constant path to learn, right? For the organization, for his people. And I asked him just before we started, what are you most proud of? Is it, best brunch in the entire region? He said, you know what? I'm really much more proud of best places to work. And so with that drives everything else. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dave and Dan Simons to get this started. And with that, let's go to Shark Tank. Dave, I think you're on mute.
Sounds great. Thanks, Keith. And thanks, Megan. I appreciate that. So, Dan, just to confirm for the benefit of the audience today, you and I have never met or spoken before. Is that fair to say?
That's true.
Great. So what I want to do today, Dan, is just spend some time with you. And I'm going to jump into the role of a broker and consultant talking to you about healthcare today. And so my desire and hope is that I kind of share some information with you, educate you a little bit on what's going on in the healthcare ecosystem, and see if there might be an opportunity, assuming that I'm trying to win the opportunity to be your broker, to have a second meeting. And so at the end of this, if you felt like I did the job appropriately and we can have a second meeting, then it's a success for me. But ultimately, we're hoping that others can learn from the conversation that we have today. So this is all about getting to know you, your business, your culture, and how we might be able to help each other. Sounds like a good use of time?
I'm ready.
All right, cool. Let's jump in. So, before we really jump into it, Dan, I think there would be some benefit for people to hear, how you describe your business and you describe your culture and what your employees mean to you. So can you kind of take a couple of minutes and just give us a high overview of your company and your culture?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a restaurateur. We've got 7 restaurants, about 1,100 employees. And our goal is to really not be a chain. We're not trying to scale. We're not trying to sort of simplify and replicate it so that we can have a ton of the same exact thing. Frankly, just the opposite. We'd really just like to have a collection of restaurants. We'll have as many as we are good enough to have. And I think we describe good enough as it's compelling for our farmer owners, it's compelling for our investors, it's compelling for our employees to keep coming back to work and grow their careers and build the lives they want. And that we can play a meaningful and compelling role in the communities that we're in. So we really take in our company a multi-stakeholder view of capitalism. It's just a different way of looking at it. Profit matters, but it's one of many things that matters, just like planet, the environment, people. And so that's really what our goal is, to advocate for family farmers, try to, be part of a rising tide in our community. So yeah, I'm a restaurateur, and so we do all of that through a restaurant company, but the restaurants are really a platform for these deep beliefs that are important to us.
That sounds great. That sounds great. And so when we talk to other CEOs, and I've talked to CEOs like you, oftentimes I know that profits and expenses are important aspects of their business. And sometimes when we talk about benefits and healthcare and things like that, that might be like a 3rd or 4th priority for them in their business. Where would you say healthcare and the cost of healthcare and access to healthcare falls within your radar?
I think it's high on my radar, actually. Not just when you say the word healthcare, but when you ask me, the sort of wellness of my employees, does that matter? Yeah, that's a top priority for me. And it doesn't matter what you want to accomplish. If you don't have profit, you can't accomplish anything. So it's high on the radar. It's a substantially relevant part of the employee experience and a substantially relevant cost on the P&L. Then yeah, and I can look in the mirror and say, and sometimes it just falls off my radar. Like, it's easy to say when you ask me, it's that important, but on the daily, food, labor, some of the things higher up on the P&L are probably certainly get more focus.
Well, that makes perfect sense. But you've talked about culture, and it's very clear how important your employees are to you. And so in thinking about your benefits that you offer to your employees today, are there benefits that you wish that you were offering your employees that you're not? And if you were to retool and revise and refine your benefits package, that you might want to add or make certain that your employees have access to? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I have. This is the easy answer for me, and not just because we're having this conversation, but the thing I aspire to is to offer free health insurance to all our employees. That's what I aspire to. Every time I try to run the math, do the numbers, it seems like this most impossible of goals, but just because something sounds impossible today shouldn't mean you should stop trying to accomplish it. We have a whole slew of benefits, but health insurance is what people need. It's cost prohibitive. We do free mental health, which we get a lot of adoption and use with. And then we struggle, even when we offer benefits, to actually educate and get as much adoption. I'm stunned by our own shortcomings, my own shortcomings, to actually communicate across 1,100 employees, let alone with some turnover, obviously, all the benefits that we have. But that's the first thing that comes to mind when you ask me that.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because in other CEOs that I've spoken to, when they think about, especially after what we've been through over the last 2.5 years, what benefits are important, telehealth is certainly high up there because people needed access to that. But as we found, a lot of people being at home, some people loved it, but some people hated it because they didn't have access to integrate and socialize with others. And mental health became even a bigger issue than most of us probably even realized it was, until we went through this. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, mental health is a great unifier, right? It doesn't discriminate between Republicans and Democrats. Mental health doesn't divide along red or blue. It is a great unifying topic. And it's relevant to 100% of the audience you're talking to.
Mhm.
Whether they know it or not, like on the surface, it is a great unifier. So yeah, it's always been something that I've focused on a lot in our company. And I'm actually thrilled that the pandemic helped shine a light on it, for more folks.
Yeah, same here, completely. Especially of being someone that was in a family where my wife actually lost her brother 10 years ago to suicide. And so I know how important mental health is. And had he had someone to reach out to, who knows what the outcome may have been. So I'm glad that you have a passion around that. I think that's great. You also talked about that you struggle sometimes to make sure that you're communicating and educating people on the benefits that they have available to them today. You're not unique in that respect, but that's an important challenge that oftentimes we're trying to help solve for our customers. What about when you think about communication today? How do you generally communicate? Is that through emails or is it through Zooms, or what do you do to help educate your people today?
Well, out of my workforce of about 1,100, about 100 are, salaried positions, either operational leadership, management chefs, or, salaried support team. And I think of those in many senses as the white collar jobs, but the bulk of our workforce it's the blue collar jobs. It's that hands-on day-to-day grind, and so communication is very different. I've got 100 folks that I can send an email to, and they'll read it, and they can get informed that way. And then I have 1,000 folks that I may or may not even have an email address for. So text messaging, text chats. So SMS is a real way to communicate. And then we have an online learning system, and folks can log in for training. They can log in to see their payroll, things like that. But still driving full adoption into that is a challenge at that level of the workers that are just on the grind. They're not at a desk. Their hands are moving all day. They're tired at the end of that day. So we definitely have some struggles there with the reality of that workforce. And I'm always looking to learn what folks are doing that works.
Well, it sounds like you've got a hunger and a thirst for knowledge, and I think it's awesome. And so that's what I'm going to try to impart today. What about when you think about healthcare as it relates to employee benefits? What would you say your healthcare literacy is? From a 1 to a 10, where would you place yourself? If 1 is, yeah, I'm a ninja, or 10, I know nothing, where would you be?
Oh, so you just flipped it upside down the way I would have thought of it. So let me just, if 1 is, I think I'm have trouble with spatial awareness. I think I'm a 3. 1 is like, I know everything.
Right.
10 is
right.
I know nothing. So maybe I would say I'm a 4. I'm a 3.5 when it comes to healthcare in the business space.
Awesome. Okay. Well, one of my roles as a consultant, if you were allow me to work with you, is part of it's education. Part of it's also to make sure that you know and are aware and familiar with what's going on in the healthcare system, so you know and understand how that impacts your plan, your benefits, and your opportunity to be able to ultimately provide free healthcare. And so I work with companies like WellNet Healthcare that helps employers like you bring to bear kind of their goals when it comes to healthcare. And sometimes it's reducing the cost of healthcare. Sometimes it's minimizing the impact to employees through reducing out of pockets and copays and deductibles. But sometimes it's going all the way to say, I want to offer free healthcare to my employees. And you have to have a vehicle to be able to do that. And I'm going to talk to you about a relationship I have with WellNet Healthcare that might be able to achieve exactly what you're looking for. So if you don't mind, how about let me jump into a little bit of the healthcare education. And this is simply my perspective on what I think some of the challenges are within healthcare and what I believe some of the needs are. And hopefully those are consistent with maybe how you think about healthcare too. So what I'm going to do is actually share with you my screen so that you can see where I'm coming from and what I'm talking about. And so let me start right here. Can you see my screen right now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So one of the things I want to talk to you first about, Dan, is this idea of where you are today and maybe where you could be. So in the environment that you're in today, you're in a fully insured plan, as I understand it. And that fully insured plan means simply that you pay a premium to cover your employees. And that premium, paying that once a month, allows you to sleep at night because you know those employees are covered for the benefits that you're offering. And that's a great way to kind of look at your health plan. But when you do that, if I were to then say to you, hey, Dan, how many people do you think you have that are diabetic? How many people do you think that you have congestive heart failure? Or how many people do you possibly think that you have that might have an addiction to painkillers or taking more than they should be? If I were to ask you those kinds of questions about the utilization of your plan and who might be using the plan more than others, do you think that you could comfortably tell me that?
No, I'm fundamentally blind to it.
Well, and that's exactly the challenge that we see when companies like you, who care about their employees as much as you do and have a healthcare plan designed the way that the one that you have today is designed. Because what happens is you pay a premium and then healthcare happens within that premium. And so that means that people go to the hospital, they go to the emergency room, they take their medicines, they do all of those kinds of things. And while they're doing these things, the sad part about the situation today is that most insurance companies and carriers are publicly traded. And so what are they trying to do? They're trying to return a shareholder profit. How do they return a shareholder? I mean, how do they return a profit to their shareholders? They think about their business, and their business is about giving access to care, but then also allowing that access to care however it needs to occur. And then also it's about how much do they pay for care. And so they're paying really whatever the doctors or hospitals are asking to be paid. And then they give them a discount for whatever they pay. But let me share this with you, Dan, that you may not know. While there's a lot of great legislation and things that they're trying to do to create transparency and trying to do things in a positive way for healthcare, one of the things that they have yet to address in the industry and in the ecosystem is how much a provider can charge for the services they render. Doesn't matter if it's a specialist or primary care or a hospital, providers are able to charge whatever they want to charge. So now think about this. When you're an insurance company that's negotiating negotiating discounts for networks as they establish those with these providers and hospitals across the country, they allow them to charge whatever they want to charge. So it's a nebulous price, but then they give them a discount off of that. So it's a discount off of a nebulous price.
I'm clearly in the wrong business.
Exactly.
That's my reaction to what you're explaining to me about like the business model on their side of the fence.
What mostly concerns you about what I just said on that right there?
Well, they just get to set their own prices. They get to create what looks like a fake compelling discount. I mean, I'd give you 50% off a burger if you're willing to start off at a $40 price. So that's what concerns me. In my business, we are held very accountable with transparency, right? With our customer. Like it's all right there.
Right.
So that's why I have such a strong reaction to that when I'm just thinking like, fuck, why can't I do that? Well, I know I can do it because my business isn't opaque and this business is.
That's exactly right. You took away from this exactly what I wanted you to take away from it. The opacity that exists within the model that you're in today is of concern to CEOs like you who like to know what's going on so they can effectively run their business, right? And you would like to believe that people are charging fair prices for the things that they do. But there's just no guidelines or rules in place so they can do whatever they want to. So here's why that also matters, because now thinking about most of those companies are publicly traded. they're not controlling the cost of care. They're not controlling the utilization of care because people can go wherever they want to go, whenever they want to go. So then what happens is you've got this kind of runaway train. So that's how the healthcare is happening within your plan today. And so if all of a sudden people are high utilizers of care and you've got a lot of sick people on your plan and they're not being managed, what happens each year is your consultant comes back to you and says, hey, Dan, this year was not a good year. And so as a result of that, we're going to have to take on this increase. Company came back to me and they wanted a 20% decrease, but a 20% increase, but I negotiated for you and I got it down to 10 or 12. And so it's not as bad as it could have been. As opposed to possibly saying, hey, here's what drove the cost of the plan this past year. And here are some of the action steps that I think we need to, employ or deploy in order to actively manage the plan going forward. But here's what happens. Even if you did that, you're still paying that increased premium each year. And if the cost of care goes down or the utilization of the cost were to go down, your premium is still the same. So you don't reap any rewards for the actions that you take. Make sense?
Yeah, and frankly, don't be offended by this. This is why the brokers are so often not well received, because for CEOs that I think are paying enough attention, it's like, you really want me to thank you for allegedly, well, it was going to be a 20% increase and now it's a 9% increase. I'm not really buying it. I know it's opaque. And I still hear that, y'all like win your annual trips to go on nice vacations. So, I mean, there's a serious skepticism from my seat when the broker is like trying to allegedly advocate for me, but when in reality, I don't feel that. And my criticism might be off base. I'm just sharing that with you. So, you've got some work to do with me to make me like actually believe you're on my side here.
So Dan, you nailed it, because you're right. Many people in my roles have a misaligned incentive. And in fact, most of the time, their commissions are directly tied to the overall premium. So if I make a 10% or 5% commission off of the premium and the plan performs poorly and you get an increase as a result to your premium because the plan's running poorly, I just got a pay raise when your company is running poorly. Doesn't seem right. That's your concern, right?
Yeah, it is my concern when really the only transaction that matters to you as my broker is, get my price as high as possible without getting me to leave you as the broker. I mean, it is a classic lack of alignment of interests. So unless you're going to talk to me about aligning interests, I'm less interested. But I'll just listen because I feel like you are talking about aligning interests.
Great. Well, I'm glad that you're passionate as you are and feel the way you feel, because that's exactly what I want to talk to you today about, is aligning the interest and make sure that you and I are on the same side of the table and have the same goals in mind. And so that's why I like working with companies like WellNet, because WellNet is a self-funded third-party administrator. And what they do is they can still structure your plan so that you just pay one premium a month if that's what you like doing. But the difference is that WellNet actively manages your healthcare expenses and takes better care of your employees. And when the utilization decreases or the cost of care decreases, then that money flows right back to you and your organization. So then you can make a decision. Hey, next year, do I want to decrease my premiums to my employees? Or maybe I can start moving closer to that objective that I want to have of being able to offer free healthcare, because now someone's minding the store for me and making sure that things are doing what they should be doing. And me as your broker, what I would like to do is attach my compensation to how well the plan performs. And so if I'm able to save you money in terms of the cost of healthcare, perhaps you'd be willing to reward me for being able to save you money. That way our interests are aligned. Would that feel better to you if that's the kind of a relationship we had?
Yes, I appreciate you saying that. That'd be nice.
Good. So now let's take a little bit deeper dive, because there's something else I think it's important for you to know as I talk about some of these other things that we're going to talk about today. Have you ever heard of this part of the Affordable Care Act called medical loss ratio? Have you heard that term or reference before?
I think that's just like, yeah, I have that. There's allegedly just a maximum that they can earn, which is why they just want the prices to keep going up.
That's exactly right. You just nailed it. Imagine if someone came to you in your restaurant group and said, "Hey, Dan, you can only make 15% profit off of everything that you do. So how are you going to now increase the revenue coming into your company other than sell more food, open more restaurants, and do the things that you can to increase the volume of business coming to you," right? And so that's how healthcare operates as well, because there's no vested interest when you're only compensated 15% to lower the cost of care or lower the amount of care that's utilized. So if they did that, that would mean the premiums would go down and the profits to their shareholders would also go down. And I don't think that the shareholders would allow that to occur, would they?
Clearly not.
So at WellNet, that's what I like about WellNet. They're a privately held company that's focused on trying to drive down the cost of care, trying to help people find a better care at a reasonable price. And ultimately, if they do that, you benefit from it. And you're going to want to stay with them because they're always doing what's right and their interests are aligned with yours. I have to show you one other thing, and this is what's really important that you may not be aware of. But in the DC market, as an example, if we were just to look at this procedure, so this procedure I've thrown up for you, it says inpatient DRG 470. You don't know what that means, but DRG stands for diagnosis related grouping, but that's simply a knee or hip surgery, okay? So if you were going to have a knee or hip surgery done somewhere in DC, here's the price variances that exist. If you went to George Washington, it's going to cost you almost $120,000. And if you went to Sibley Memorial, it's going to cost you around $40,000. So just there for that one procedure, you can see that one hospital can charge 3x versus the other hospital for the same procedure. And by the way, the cost of care and the quality of care varies greatly because of what I told you earlier, because providers can charge whatever they want to charge for the services they perform. Now, if you think about healthcare and you were to allow your employees to go wherever they want to go, like they do today, they may go to George Washington University every single time they need a knee or hip surgery. But they do that just because people typically go there because that's where they had a child, they were born themselves, or someone recommended that they go, maybe even their physician, without knowledge of the cost of the care or the quality and outcomes of that care. So one of the things I think is important, and WellNet shares this view, is that it's pretty important to help guide and navigate people to the best care at the best prices with the best outcome. And what I like about that whole mindset is that it's kind of acting like a GPS of healthcare. You know, today I could not drive to visit one of your restaurants unless I turned on my GPS. Not a chance. However, if you're going into the healthcare system, there's this belief that you should be able to enter into the healthcare system for whatever you need to have done and go wherever you want to go, and it's going to be okay. That's not true. People need guidance, they need education, and they need information to make informed decisions. And so that's what I like about WellNet, how they focus on doing exactly that. So let me pause for a second and see if you have any thoughts, reactions to what I've shared with you so far.
I mean, that's insane. Like just, just looking at the slide that you have on the screen. Yeah, I get it. So is my interpretation here that like people on my plan might be getting something done at GW, like this knee replacement, and we're paying 120 grand. And therefore my premiums end up going up because that's where we choose to go. So next year our provider is like, wow, these guys spend a lot of money. and nobody even is managing that they should have or could have gone elsewhere. Like, is that what I'm interpreting here?
That's exactly right. Cost is a huge driver of it, but here's what might also be true. It could be that, GW also has the worst quality and has the worst outcomes. And so here's what's this dichotomy that people struggle with. People believe that the higher cost of the care, the higher quality of care, but that's just not true. In fact, if you think about most things in business, when people do things and they do it often and they do it well, they become very efficient at it. And when they become efficient at it, then they don't have to charge as much because it doesn't require much effort. That also happens in healthcare. Oftentimes, the providers who are very good at what they do for a given service or procedure, they oftentimes don't have to charge as much because they're very good at it. And it doesn't require as much resources or time or effort to do what they do. So in reality, oftentimes those providers who charge less oftentimes deliver higher quality and better outcomes. Sounds a little different than what most people might think, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So now let me talk to you a little bit about why I like this WellNet and why I would bring someone like this company to really address the things that are going on within your plan. And so they have this really cool thing they call a toolkit. And within their toolkit, they have all of these different types of cost containment mechanisms that they can deploy for your plan, really based on your comfort level and what feels good to you. And the other part I like them, they have this mantra and this change management philosophy they call crawl, walk, run. So that simply means on a crawling, you can start out and say, okay, Dave, I don't want to make a lot of changes. I want to keep my same plan design I have today. I want to keep the same network I have today. And I want to have a national PBM network. Let me just start off slow, maybe with training wheels. Can I do that? Answer that as yes. And then as we start sharing information with you, and now you have the opacity to your plan is removed, and you have complete transparency to now know exactly what's driving your cost, where are the costs coming from, and what you can do to take action to drive down those costs, and you're an informed consumer, then we have an opportunity to start deploying more of these tools in their toolkit. I'll highlight, I'm not going to share all of these with you, but I got to highlight for you a couple of them that I really think are big and important. As an example, with 1,100 employees, you may have a number of people that are on your plan, they're active on your plan, but yet they're eligible for Medicare. And if they are, they may not know that there are options available to them where the plans have greater benefits, but it would cost them less. And so WellNet actually calls those folks, educates them on what opportunities might exist for them, and then allows them to make an informed decision whether they want to stay on your plan or move elsewhere for possibly richer benefits at a lower cost. And they have a 50% success rate in just doing that. And if you stop and pause for a second, unfortunately, those of us my age and older probably are higher consumers of healthcare. And so it would be okay with you probably if they moved off of the plan and onto another plan that's offered where you don't have to bear that expense or that risk. What do you think about that in and of itself? Any concerns with that kind of idea?
No, I mean, I like this. It's like just looking at this, it's already bringing up several things. And, I'd love to have somebody actually on my side all year round instead of, like, oh, it's renewal time. Here I am to allegedly help you. So like, I look at this list and I'm like, you mean there's a company that would actually do this in an ongoing way?
Exactly.
Forgive my skepticism, but I've been buying health insurance for a long time. So, like this page specifically is very different. I've never had anybody offer to help advocate for these sorts of things in an ongoing way.
You're right. You probably haven't. And you're not unique, unfortunately, because many CEOs like you are not aware that their plan could be actively managed like this. So then all of a sudden, now they get a chance to manage their healthcare business the way they manage every other aspect of their business. And so I have to share with you two others that I really think are great that they do. The other one is dialysis carve out. They just recently had a customer, and that customer, they found out that they were on dialysis. Unfortunately, that's a very bad condition to have. It's also very, very expensive. And so they were using their dialysis PPO network. They were able to pay literally 15% of what the cost would normally be. So to that plan, it meant that they paid $800,000 less for just dialysis treatment, allowing them to go to the same dialysis provider, the same location, didn't have to change anything, no disruption to them, but the out-of-pocket was less. And in fact, this company said, hey, if you call and speak to WellNet, allow them to guide you, then we're willing to waive your deductible, co-insurance, and copay completely. So this employer did exactly what you described. Because they chose to call WellNet, speak to an advocate on dialysis, that it cost them nothing, no out of pocket. So then they had no barriers to go get the care that they needed. And I love that about them. That's the kind of stuff I like. Or they did this other thing that I thought was also great. There's a lot of people today, unfortunately, that suffer with rheumatoid arthritis, and they're having to take Humira. And so Humira is a very expensive drug, $6,000 to $7,000 a month. Fortunately, it will go to generic in the near future, but right now it's very expensive. And so WellNet was able to actually internationally source that drug for that patient and save them, well, save the employer, first of all, half of that, 50% of the cost. Same thing, that employer said, look, if you call WellNet and let their advocates guide you and you can save the plan that much money, then I'm going to waive your out of pocket expenses. And so same thing, they waived their deductible, copay, and coinsurance. And so they got the medication they needed for their serious condition for free. So what I like about WellNet and how it aligns with what you said at the beginning, I want to align myself with someone in some way through a vehicle to be able to deliver some free healthcare to my employees. And I think that's what they're doing. Let me pause for a second because I did share a lot of information. Thoughts and reactions to what you've heard so far.
So I just want to make sure I get it. So there's the health insurance company. So WellNet is like, it's like middleware, like it sits in between WellNet's not the broker and WellNet's not the insurance provider. It sits in between to provide options for a broker to sort of sell. And then you're still buying health insurance from a health insurance company, and WellNet is helping you manage it effectively. Am I getting that?
Yeah, you sure are. That's exactly right. There's many ways to look at it. I like the middleware analogy. Some people might say we're kind of an aggregator, but what they're basically doing is they take a lot of solutions that exist within the healthcare ecosystem. They found the best and brightest of those people that do what they do well, pulled them together and said, hey, we want to work with all of these within this self-contained kind of our own developed ecosystem, and then roll that out and allow people to benefit from that, and then also be able to reap the rewards from what they do and the actions they take. And so, yeah, they're kind of like the middleware and aggregator of the best and brightest solutions that exist within the healthcare system that align with employers to try to save them money. And if it makes sense, you can still keep the same broker that you have today. And oftentimes you can use the same network or a network that's very similar. It's a national network. And there's a company called a pharmacy benefit manager. And oftentimes you're using a national pharmacy benefit manager to manage the pharmacy as it comes in and flows to your employees. So I guess simply said, it means that typically you go to the same pharmacy that you're going to today, same doctors, same hospitals, and the places you go to get care. It's just a matter of now you've got someone helping to hold your hand and navigate you to the best places whenever you need care or you need medicine.
So, well, go ahead, keep going.
Okay. So really the final thing that I'll share with you is that the good news is that I did some research and found out that WellNet actually does business and works with companies just like yours. people that are in the hospitality and restaurant business. And in fact, I'll share with you that one of their clients, they chose to go with this kind of crawl mentality right at the top. This company actually owns both hotels and restaurants in the hospitality industry. They've got about 245 people covered under the plan, chose to not make any changes to their plan initially. And over the last 7 years has saved over $120,000 every single year. And in fact, what this company is doing is that they've done two things. One, they've waived the premium for their employees for 1 month. And then they've also been able to offer their employees the same health care at no additional cost, not increasing their premiums, not increasing their deductibles and copays, and do that every year for the last 4 years. So they work with companies just like you. And that's what I also thought was pretty important, why I would even recommend or suggest them to you. So I guess what you've heard today, Dan, what's your thoughts about what you've heard? Because what I would like to do is set up just another appointment for you. And what we can do is gather some information. I can send that over to WellNet. They'll do what they call this toolkit analysis, come back to me and you, and I can show you what all the opportunities are within your plan today and how you're saving money and how potentially they could not only save your plan money, but then achieve the goal that you wanted of really being able to offer free healthcare at some point in the future. How's that sound?
Yeah, it sounds good. I think the only thing I'm thinking, I don't like to go to the next step until I understand why wouldn't I go to the next step? Like, I must be missing something right now, right? Like, who's it not a match for? Who makes this change to WellNet and regrets it, and why? Like, what's the retention percent of the people that do make this change and stick there? Like, set aside why it's great and tell me when and why it isn't.
Great question, first of all. And so I see Keith has joined. So I actually brought along the CEO of WellNet Healthcare because if we got to this stage where we could have some of this dialogue, he wanted to be a part of that. And so Keith, let me bring you into the conversation.
Yeah.
And maybe
why don't we do this? By the way, Dave,
things.
Great job on outlining the initial opportunities, and maybe we go back to just the three of us on screen for a moment. We can review with Dan what worked, some areas of improvement. Maybe we take off the presentation right now with the screen share. And so, by the way, Dan, you asked some very good questions. You're a terrific participant, and Davey did a great job unfolding this. I'd say this, one item is that, WellNet is a replacement plan to the fully insured carrier. So the carriers sell what's called a fully insured plan. They also sell self-funded plans or ASO, administrative services offerings. So WellNet competes with those carriers, providing the same doctors, as Dave mentioned, the same hospitals, the same prescription drugstores, just in essence, sitting on the same side of the table as you. So you don't keep your current, I believe, Blue Cross plan, you replace it with WellNet's either Aetna or Cigna, and then you move down the pathway, this crawl, walk, run journey at a savings at your own pace, depending on your culture, as you kind of outlined. But before I even dig in further there, I'm curious, what do you think worked about the presentation today? Like, what did you learn, and what do you think worked?
Well, what worked for me, the slides were absorbable, and they, I feel like sometimes people that are trying to, pitch, sell, explain something, they put up a slide, but then they're sort of talking about something else, or they're not there. I thought Dave did a nice job with he determined this content is important for me. He showed me something I could absorb, and he talked about what I could absorb with it. And then he asked me if I had any questions. So I also, I think there's some courage to stop and pause, and makes me think you're confident when you're willing to stop and pause and say, hey, I just unloaded some information there. Do you have any questions? So that style really works for me.
That's great. Thank you. By the way, Dave, hat tip to you. And then, by the way, before I go to my next question for any of the audience participants, feel free. I know I see a couple questions in the chat box. Feel free to continue to pipe in questions, whether for Dan and or Dave as well, and I'll relay them in just a moment. And I guess really the more important question, what didn't work, right? What didn't make sense? What did you need more clarity on? And I kind of heard it a touch at the end, but I'd love for you to elaborate if you don't mind.
I mean, overall, Dave comes across as a pro to me, and like Dave, that's your style, and that generally works. The specifics, like I'm always paying attention to the details, and especially if I'm going to decide that I'm going to trust you to educate me, I want to have a high bar, right? Because if I'm going to adopt you as a teacher, I better be right, So just a few little details. Like when you went full screen on the PowerPoint, I could still see some of your notes. So like you went full screen in Zoom, but you didn't go full screen in PowerPoint. So one, it's a little distraction because I could still see your ribbon and all the toolbars and all the functionality. So it's just a bit of a mental distraction. But the fact that I could see some of your notes, like I don't want to think that you're looking at your notes. Not that I mind that people are looking at notes, but I don't want to think someone is. So that was one. This is just, again, I guess it's all personal. I don't like being told that I've asked a good question. I wouldn't have asked it if I didn't think it was a good question, and I don't need an endorsement of that. I want just to so although you don't strike me as disingenuous at all, and I'm not like super critical when I hear that, there are times when I'm like, whatever, say something useful to me. Don't tell me my question is good. If I were to be like super, critical. I feel the same way when someone frankly says like, well, to be honest or to be transparent, like all of those things, that's a great question. I'm sort of like, wow, you're full of shit is generally my reaction. I'm not saying that to you, Dave. That's just, how I might respond. I loved when you talked about aligned interest. And I think so I would say this was just effective. That works for me. I think it's something that should be emphasized. Again, it has to be done authentically. And so bringing up the reality of like, some of these commissions are bullshit. And why is it okay when someone's commissions go up when the performance isn't there? Like, I don't think, that's a problem with our industry, and we're doing something different than that. That would work for me. On the chart, I really like the chart about, they can charge this, they bill this, but I couldn't interpret the quality. I saw it, it's on the legend. I think it was in orange, but it was sort of maybe on the x-axis. So I wanted to absorb that piece there. And just the chart structure didn't help me do that. I didn't understand why the word blade was at the top of walk, crawl, run. And so then I was like thinking like, oh, it's like a scalpel or it's a blade, or what is that word doing there? And then maybe I wanted to hear, and again, maybe not to get a first meeting, but like, is there a competitor? What's the downside? I don't want to hear that you're like, you are the perfect girl for me, because what are the odds? Like I want to hear like, I'm a really good match. Here's my imperfections. You're probably not the easiest client either, but so like, if we're honest with the shortcomings on both sides, this is why WellNet is awesome. So that, that's the stuff that makes me feel I'm not being sold to, I'm being engaged with. And those are my reactions.
By the way, all of those interesting to hear. And so I'd say this, right? Like we try to, and as an advisor, right, who's going in to pitch something, they try to pack in as much as they can in a short period of time. For Dave's reference, like, he removed a lot of slides of which would have unpacked the crawl, walk, run, and why the blade is important, and some of the savings and the differentiators, right? Because most brokers and advisors, they're coming in with United, Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, and maybe they'll come in with a TPA. Most everybody else, Dan, is just paying claims, right? 95% auto adjudication, which when that happens, right, a lot of inefficiency, a lot of waste, or at times other people may use the word fraud occur. And so what WellNet's really area of expertise is, and I think as a organization and those that we teach out there in the industry, we need to do a better job of explaining, listen, we control the cost of the claim before it gets paid, right? And that's something that didn't come across today, because if you can do that, right, the light bulb goes off and you say, wait a minute, you're protecting my money because gosh, those folks that I'm using right now are not doing that. Nobody's sitting on the same side of the table. I can't believe, right, and you didn't say this, Dave, that you have 95% retention, right? Why do 5% of your customers leave? And so certainly with more time available, right, you can unpack some of these other areas of opportunity. And, ultimately, what is today about in the conversation? It's about optimizing the health plan, right? And so most people optimize their hiring processes, their purchasing, their food, right? Cisco, whoever else you may buy from, you use software to control the number of hours that people work, but there's nothing out there. There's nothing available that actually controls the cost of the health insurance, right? Before those dollars get actually paid. And so that's that differentiator that advisor who's bringing WellNet in is they're finally sitting on the same side of the table. And so I guess I'd flip the question back to you is, what does optimizing your health plan look like to you, Dan? If WellNet's not here, you got a different advisor or the same advisor, what does a perfect world around your health plan look like?
Well, I mean, I gotta say, Keith, I think I did absorb that. I liked that there weren't a lot of slides. I like a 20 or 30 minute, like get you interested. And it's certainly like, it got me asking these questions, right? And it's like, so I think the information was really good. I mean, your language around optimization. Look, I spent $125,000 a few years ago to install a system that audits and optimizes my use of electricity. It's like it goes into the fuse box, it goes into the panels, it sees where the electricity is coming from. I know what every piece of equipment is doing, time of day of week, whatever. And so to me, that's a really good comparison. You feel like your electric bill is like impossible to manage. It's like turn off the lights, turn down the air conditioning. It's like, no, the intel's at the panel. It can be known. You need an expert that has this lens and then has the software and the resources and aligned interests. So that company that I pay that money to, we've on the electricity optimization, totally aligned interest. I think when you can make that point, no one has ever said that to me about healthcare. People sell it to me, the fucking costs go up, nobody helps me. I know when my renewal is because I know that 90 days before my renewal, brokers show up, and it's so that language. So what does it look like? It looks like what you described, like the dialysis example, brilliant, totally stuck with me. A carve out, the Humira example stuck with me. I see the commercials on TV. You tell me how expensive it is. So that works for me. And I love the optimization language.
Awesome. Thank you. And so I'd say this, right? But one reason maybe you don't hear this kind of message, right, is that everything Dave has kind of talked about today and everything that you're looking for is about removing revenue streams, right? Removing revenue streams from the health systems, removing revenue streams from the pharmacy benefit managers. And because of all those vested interests, right, there is awareness that's being kept mostly from your CFO or yourself or your HR. And, at times, because healthcare is so complicated, it's just easier to put a few vendors on a spreadsheet, right? That doesn't cut it anymore because that 20% increase that, you got as a company and the broker got knocked down to 12, you still had to absorb the 12 increase. Maybe you don't want to do it anymore. So you pass along that increase to your employees, of which most people don't have $1,000 in the bank. So how are they going to pay their $1,000 or $2,500 deductible? What this is really talking about is getting everybody aligned so you can improve the experience, improve the cost, right? Improve the quality. And now what in essence, and I'll go back to the slide that Dave had on the end, underneath, and that was Cipriani Restaurants, the hotel and restaurant chain. That was the first group. The second group was a large automobile dealer here in the Washington area that, frankly, they're not just competing with the 15 other mega dealers in the region. They're competing with the federal government. They're competing with Amazon for talent. So the benefit plan finally becomes a retention tool and an acquisition tool. So there's so much more to just the benefit, right? It's the cash preservation, it's the workforce development, it's the culture. And so I wish more executives like you, Dan, would take the time to have a healthcare conversation than typically they, revisit it at the 10-month that you referred to. So, it's, frankly, you and I know each other. It was very gracious of you to spend this time here, but like most executives don't take this time. And so now I'll flip the question back to Dave. Dave, what do you wish that Dan may have asked or delved into further that, could have been explored more deeply?
So I like the ebb and flow of the conversation and the questions that he was asking and when he asked them. And so what I thought was valuable is that he was asking questions when I was sharing information to make sure he understood it and to clarify it. And I think to me that was key to help with the flow of the conversation. So there's really not anything that I would have suggested or asked Dan to do differently, but I think it's more about having a willingness and a desire to learn and to possibly see a part of their business through a different lens that they've never looked at before, and being open-minded to say, maybe this is a point of vulnerability that I didn't realize I had in my business that I might need to address and look at in a different way for the first time.
You know what I think can get people there? Like, Dave, you did something that really needs to be acknowledged, which is you did engage in conversation with me. And so like, I wanted to talk about mental health because I always want to talk about mental health, right? Like, it's just like, it's a thing I do. I can bring it up in every conversation I have. Well, you shared something incredibly personal about what your wife experienced, right? The loss of her brother, I think you said. And so that struck me. And it struck me that you had the courage and the vulnerability to share that in that moment. There's no way you went into this conversation planning to say that. I just can't believe you were planning on saying it. So in that moment, you're not selling me anything. You're not a broker. Like, my desire to talk about a topic, you met with a desire to share something that mattered to you about the topic. I can tell you from that moment, and I know, I don't really role play anything. Like, if I'm here, I'm in, I'm trying to learn, like, this is valuable for me. But I think if you have a broker audience, if you have a salesperson audience, you can't be being authentic. You can't be being vulnerable, but you do, because you're still in a business setting. You do need to read we call it reading the guest, but you need to read the audience. And so, like, had you just randomly brought up a thing that made you vulnerable, I'd be like, this dude's weird. But you brought up something that you shared that was relevant to me. So it's not a sales tactic. I think that you can teach. It's a relationship approach that when it's authentic to someone that happens to be in sales, it really works.
That's awesome. By the way, and I think you hit the nail on the head, right? It's relationship development. It's connecting. You may want to go into a meeting, right, and talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, but you've always got to be able to sidestep that script and be able to have that genuine, authentic conversation. These are not healthcare conversation our folks are having. They're business conversations, right? They're human interest, right? Everybody's got a healthcare story, right? A great experience, but also more timely, right? I'd say a disaster. And so if you can create that connectivity, right, now you've built that trusted relationship, and now you become somebody who is now deemed, as I think you referred to before, right, that expert, right? Notes or no notes.
Yeah, good stuff.
Dan, thank you very much. We've got a minute and a half left. There were two questions that came up from folks. One is, can we get a copy of the deck? Absolutely. Megan and her team will share that around afterwards. And then the other is, care navigation, right? What does WellNet provide in terms of tools and people and technology? So it's a pod-like infrastructure. It's a suite of individuals that really work towards member advocacy, right? It's our fastest growing division within WellNet, and it's high touch, it's follow up, follow through, everything done via email, phone, text, in the mobile device as well. And so there's a lot more that Dave and his team can share. And then for any brokers that joined today, really thank you all for giving us the hour of your schedule. We know you have many other items to do right now, and to be able to join us for continuing education of this caliber with someone like Dan Simon, who is just an unbelievable expert in this industry, and someone who is a thought leader, right? Not just a thought leader in hospitality, but a thought leader in the business community. So Dan, hat tip to you, and we appreciate the time, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Great.
Nice to meet you, Dan. Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.